In this episode of PulsePoint, we'll update you on these topics. The tragic case of a gender-confused teenager trying to remove her breast. Dr. Ben Carson says America needs a revival of the nuclear family. A new study shows a school cell phone ban can have huge benefits. Children under 9 will not be taught sex education in England. And finally, a US study shows that the risk of suicide is 20% higher after a transgender operation. Welcome to PulsePoint, the latest media stories and research related to family and society that you need to know about. It's time to cut through the spin and uncover the real issues. I'm Tambi Stowers. A disturbing story appeared in the mainstream media last week, and it's the response to the tragic case that should concern us all. The New Zealand Herald featured this story. Transgender teen tries to cut off breast in self-mastectomy, Wellington doctors. A New Zealand high schooler attempted to cut off his own breast in an act of desperation after years on a stretched public health system waitlist for gender-affirming surgery, according to a report in the New Zealand Medical Journal today. The 18-year-old female-to-male transgender man went to hospital several hours into the self-attempted mastectomy after he became concerned about damaging a nerve. Remember that while the New Zealand Herald referred to the high schooler as he and his own breast, that person is a biological female, a woman. The doctors then said not all transgender people wanted gender affirmation surgery, but those who did should be able to get it, and limited access to surgery in New Zealand was an increasing issue. Now, last year, News Hub had an interview with the only surgeon in New Zealand who performed these operations.
Down their Adam's apple just means that they no longer have to always hide behind scarves and things like that for them. So it just provides that next level of ease and comfort and freedom of living that I think all of us deserve. So, yeah.
Do we need more of these operations done to help the kind of people that you help in this office?
I believe so. We are seeing more patients entering gender service, and so long term I am projecting that potentially more clients will require gender affirmation genital surgery.
What would these doctors say if the same patient was a vulnerable girl with anorexia who was trying to couch the fat out of her stomach, or cut her buttocks off because she said she was fat? Or what would they say if a young patient pleaded with them to cut their arm off because they wanted to be disabled, a condition known as xenomelia? Doesn't this young vulnerable girl in the story need counseling and care instead of castration and confusion? In a complete contrast, at a conference held in Wellington to discuss the better way to care for gender-confused young people, one of the speakers was Mel from Australia, a detransitioner. Here is a bit of her story from an Australian current affair documentary.
After the operation, Mel, was there a light bulb moment? What made you want to be a woman again?
I don't know if it's light bulb, but it's like I heard I was called Mason, and that literally just it just felt so foreign and alien. And then it's just like, why is it hearing that name just feels so disorienting for me?
Her testimony and her brokenness and mental anguish from her journey moved many to tears at the conference during the weekend. It was a moment of truth and light, Mel's testimony of recovery and hope, in complete contrast to the deception of the media coverage of the tragic 18-year-old Kiwi girl going down the road that Mel had gone previously. Dr. Ben Carson's recently released book, The Perilous Fight, Overcoming Our Culture's War on the American Family, stresses the critical importance of traditional nuclear families in American society. Dr. Carson, an accomplished neurosurgeon and former Republican presidential candidate, argues that the erosion of family values poses a significant threat to the nation. Various societal factors include government overreach and ideological influences contribute to this decline. Dr. Carson calls on individuals to actively engage in defending family values, a message that he gave at our forum on family 10 years ago.
It is very important for people who do believe in established traditional marriage to speak up about it, because the only way that the non-traditionalists win is if everybody else shuts up.
In a recent interview with the Christian Post, his takeaway message for readers is to recognize that we are in a fight, who we're fighting, and that they are an important part of that fight, a fight to restore and preserve a key foundation of American society, the family. Despite the backlash against banning phones in schools in New Zealand, studies from a Norwegian research paper found only positive impacts from implementing school phone ban. The study was conducted by Sarah Abrahamson from the Norwegian Institute of Public Health. Ms. Abrahamson's 4 major findings were as follows. The number of psychological consultation was reduced by 60% in female students. The incidence of bullying for both girls and boys lowered. Girls made gain in GPA in externally graded mathematics tests. Girls were more likely to attend an academic high school track. The author found that the stricter the smartphone policy, the greater the improvement among female students. Interestingly, girls from socioeconomic backgrounds showed the most improvement. However, smartphone bans did not affect boys' mental health and GPA. Abrahamson concluded that banning smartphones from school could be a cost-effective measure to better student outcomes. Schools in England will be expected to no longer teach sex education to children under 9, as well as gender identity until the age of 13. A revised relationships, sex and health education, RSHE guidelines will introduce new age limits on sex education and enable more parental engagement. Parents will also have full transparency and access to curriculum and resources used in schools. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan said, gender ideology shouldn't be presented as fact, and children should not be taught things like 72 genders.
We've also reiterated that, gender ideology, identity ideology shouldn't be taught in schools as well. So they're the 3 main bits.
But not at a different age.
Well, it's the difference between the protected characteristic of gender reassignment. Of course, that should be taught, and that exists, and that is something adults can do. But that's different from gender ideology. You know, there's a spectrum of gender. There could be 72. There could be fluid. It could change daily. That kind of. There's a lot of contested views in those areas, so we want those not to be taught as fact.
A recent Korea market research poll on gender-affirming treatment echoed similar sentiments, where 69% of respondents opposed gender ideology in primary schools. The updated guidelines will help to ensure facts are taught like biological sex, and that contested views like gender ideology are not being taught in schools. And finally, one of the most common statements made by transgender activists in relation to trans-identifying children is, would you rather have a trans kid or a dead kid if you don't let them transition? This claim is used to engender fear and anxiety in parents. It also figures in the practice of schools keeping a child's social transition secret from parents, in the shutting down of debate about the safety of puberty blockers, and in the promotion of bans on so-called conversion therapy. Now, landmark research from Finland earlier this year found that the risk in a large group of trans-identifying youth was predicted not by the gender distress itself, but by the mental health problems that often accompany gender distress. And last year, a study in Denmark found that trans-identifying people had a suicide death rate 3.5 times higher, and a suicide attempt rate 7.7 times higher than people who did not identify as transgender. Now, a new study just published shows that those who underwent gender surgery had a suicide risk 12 times higher than those who did not. The study utilized patient data from 56 healthcare organizations in the US and over 90 million patients. The study concluded gender-affirming surgery is significantly associated with elevated suicide attempt risks, underlying the necessity for comprehensive post-procedure psychiatric support. The study's findings fly in the face of the argument from those advocating radical gender theory, who claim that gender-affirming care prevents suicide attempts. Now, Dr. Jordan Peterson blasted both President Joe Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau following the release of the study's result, as both countries, like New Zealand, have yet to take any action to curb the dangerous effects of gender procedures, especially on children. This is what Jordan Peterson posted on X. 12 times the suicide rate post gender-affirming surgery. The butchers and liars were murderously wrong. The CARES report indicated this. Canada and US are still enabling this. That's you, President Biden and Justin Trudeau, and it is utterly barbarous and inexcusable. Putting children to the knife. Follow the signs, gentlemen. Perhaps Jordan Peterson could also include our Prime Minister in this post. And that's the latest episode of PulsePoint. You can check out all these stories and more on our website, familyfirst.nz. We'll keep watching the news so that you don't have to. See you next time.